Welcome everyone. My name is Dan Pearson. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Genvid Technologies, and this afternoon I'm going to be interviewing my boss, Chris Cataldi, giving me a rare opportunity to interrogate him on some of our future plans and what he's been up to over the last couple of years since we really started getting Genvid's technology out there in earnest. Chris, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background, how you came to be one of the co-founders of Genvid, and what the basics of the company are?
Sure. So I look forward to your interrogation. So the name is Chris Cataldi. I'm one of the co-founders, COO of Genvid. We started the company just over 4 years ago, almost 4.5 years ago now, time flies. And we started with the premise that we wanted to create tools for game developers to let them directly address the viewing audience that is growing and very vibrant today. My background is, before this, me and several of the other co-founders worked for a company called Shinra Technologies, which is Square Enix's cloud gaming subsidiary. And we spent several years figuring out new gaming experiences that could only be enabled by the cloud. And as part of that, we had our eyes opened to the opportunity of viewers being non-players, being able to directly interact with games that they were watching. Before that, I have a long history in Japan, working with Japanese blue chip companies doing marketing of technology. I've worked for the Japanese government on the JET program, doing translation and interpretation for a few years, and a couple of other jobs that probably I can talk about some other time.
I think anyone who's a Final Fantasy fan will start to understand the implications of the Shinra technology moniker for the previous company. And I know some of the technology that was kind of first sort of explored, I guess, there has come through to what Genvid's doing now. Now, I mean, we're not entirely evil, right? We're not trying to suck the mana out of the world to power stations. We're not going to start dropping plates on anybody.
Well, Shinra definitely wasn't evil, and Genvid is even less so. And what we were thinking about at Shinra was, under the tutelage and vision of my former boss, the CEO of Square Enix, and then the president of Shinra, Yoichi Wada, creating completely new experiences that had never been seen, played with, or made before. And the idea was that because the game industry, or all industry, but specifically game industry, as Wada-san saw it, came at the intersection of three main axes: content, being the narrative, etc., technology, and business model, that the cloud offered a new way of interacting with all three of those. It would fundamentally change the technology, it would fundamentally change the kind of content that could be powered, and it would open up ways to new business model. And so while the code base is completely different, what we're doing at Genvid is completely different, we still share that exact same idea that streaming video from the cloud, which is what all streaming is today. We're streaming, even with streamers, we're streaming from our individual web cameras to the cloud, and then streaming that to everywhere where people on their end user devices are able to watch it, can create and power new experiences that can, via the new technology, that can be monetized and interacted with it in new ways. Okay.
So exactly where does Genvid's main SDK sit in that process? I mean, to what end are developers able to take this on, and how does that affect the way in which they're reaching their market?
So I would say, in order to answer that, I need to explain what I think the current situation is today, which is developers, for the most part, are not engaged in the viewer ecosystem. They create games for players. Some of those players take that game while they're playing it. They do a video capture local on their device, and they stream that to Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, etc. And the people on those platforms who are watching it are interacting with each other, and sometimes, very rarely, with the people playing the game via chat. And what Genvid enables is a complete change from this paradigm to be something where the viewer is the cohort that the developer is able to directly touch. So by which I mean, it's not about creating experiences only for someone sitting with a controller in their hand or a mouse and keyboard, but someone who is watching a stream being able to actually reach out and touch the stream they're watching and interact with the game. And by doing that, developers can not only create value for their existing games, but also create completely new games where the viewer is the center of the interaction loop. And the developer could, for the first time, author what kind of experiences they want the viewers to have and how they want other actors in that ecosystem, being other streamers, other games, to be part of that in a authentic way. Up until now, that level of control, that level of authorship was not possible because the developers did not have the tools to actually author the viewer experience. And where Genvid's SDK sits in there is we take out the data from the game, expose that in a way that the viewer can have a unique experience, but also create ways for the viewer's input to be fed back into the game if the developer so chooses, so as to impact both the player experience, the overall game world, as well as the other viewers' experiences. So we tend to see ourselves as the medium between the game and the stream and the game.
Mm. So essentially really turning viewers in a sense into players by allowing them, if the developer wants to directly interact with what's happening in the game, right? This isn't just an interactivity that lets them talk to a streamer or talk to other viewers. They are having a direct effect on the experience and becoming players themselves.
So that's a interpretation that we often get, which is our goal to create all viewers becoming players? And that is one way of interpreting it. And if the developer wants to do that, that is definitely an option. But most people who are watching also have the option to play games, whether it's casual games, mid-core games, hardcore games, VR games, more immersive, and they are choosing to engage in a stream. Most of the time, streaming consumption is not a skill-based experience, and to play, for the most part, is a skill-based experience. So for us, it's about enabling the full spectrum of interactivity, including play, but you can have fun without playing. Most of us who had experiences watching live sports aren't playing anything. Maybe some people have fantasy, etc. But for the most part, we're watching and we're enjoying that viewership experience, and we're cheering and we're part of the action, but we're not necessarily playing a game. So for us, it's about creating interactive or powering interactive experiences for viewers that are being authored by developers. And so it's a little bit of a fuzzy state between play and view and play, but it's definitely something that's more engaging and more interactive than just streaming consumption, being viewing, as it exists today, period.
So this is something, as you say, it's something that people can sit back and relax and enjoy. They don't necessarily have to participate, but the option is there.
Absolutely.
So I guess maybe analogous to some interactive features on broadcast television, for example.
Yes, but broadcast television is a function of the standard which it was created, right? So we're usually dealing with legacy systems. We're dealing with usually televising the real world. So there's a lot of stuff that isn't contextually tagged, right? When I'm taking live video of the world, it's just flat information, not even information because it's been contextualized. It's data. It's a live feed of pixels. What games have is all of the rich information that is trapped behind each rendered pixel that we don't have to do a lot of work to expose that data for viewers, because that's the way games are created. So we can easily tag data in the game, including all the information about player position, inventory, map data, all of that stuff that real world video wishes they had, that games, by product of them being authored content using more up-to-date technology, they have at our disposal, and we can literally just expose that to viewers as well, for at least the base information state, as well as it's hard for viewers of traditional broadcast television to affect what's going on in the broadcast, right? I can't make it rain while I'm watching baseball, and I can't do any of that kind of stuff because, first of all, I'm usually watching in a significant delay, but second of all, I don't have access to weather making technology. But for games or anything using a game engine, and we can talk a little bit probably about that later, Dan, about how the game engines themselves are transversing traditional game boundaries and going into all kinds of new genres, being movie or live production for non-gaming content. Viewers can literally go and affect the elements of the thing that they're watching.
And I guess so let's talk a little bit just to crystallize this idea, just to make sure the concept is understood. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the examples of the way that developers have implemented technology so far, because we're trying not to be prescriptive about this, right? We're not saying, here's how you do it for FPS, here's how you do it for sports games, here's how you do it for X, Y, and Z, right? This is very much relying really on the creativity of developers to show us what they can make with the tools that we're providing.
Yeah, so I mean, that gets to one of our core philosophies. Genvid is not a content creation company. Shimmer was a platform, but we also spearheaded a bunch of games that were created for cloud. What Genvid's vision is creating the tools for other people to enable their creativity and open up new horizons for them. And so, to your point, a lot of the minutia in terms of what the end experience is for viewers is completely at the control of the developers. But some of the things that have been quite compelling so far, I can talk about. So most people, when they search Genvid, they see tags about esports, or Counter-Strike, for example, is one of them. And that's because we power 3 of the last 4 Counter-Strike majors for Twitch for what has been called the Premium Pass, which is in essence a end-to-end fully interactive experience for viewers to be able to watch any player perspective and get dynamic, rich information that feels like it's in-engine spectating, but on Twitch directly. So the ability to pull up any player perspective, watch from that player perspective live on Twitch while listening to the in-game shoutcasting, being able to bring in all of the data that, again, for each viewer at any given time of each player, all of their headshot ratio, how good they are with their smokes, etc., as though it's AR. So that for those people who haven't, I implore you to do a quick Google search. But if you're trying to imagine in your head, imagine you're watching any sport, and at any given time you can highlight the player that you want to highlight and get all of their information about what happened during this round, last round, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. Next, the ability to pull up the scoreboard in any given time. Again, up until now, you're waiting for the broadcast to literally, decide when to show you the scoreboard. And while there are some elements of the scoreboard that are in the UI that are always there, that are baked in, you don't know necessarily the give and take of, it might be 12 versus 11 in terms of rounds won, but what was the, 12 versus 11, what was the interplay between them? Were there win streaks, etc.? That's actually all information the game has that with Genvid powered streams, the viewer can actually show. And we didn't do this alone. We partnered with a company called Stats Helix, which was the #1 esports analytics company, specifically had expertise in Counter-Strike. And they're the ones who used our technology to build this experience. And then we partnered with the top broadcasters being ESL, Faceit, StarLadder, et cetera, to provide that to viewers on Twitch. And the last but not least, and the thing that we're focusing on a lot more right now, is not just providing rich information or being able to literally choose what cameras you want to watch, but as a viewer, when we're in the stadium, we feel the compulsion to cheer. And the reason we want to cheer is because we want people to hear the cheer, because we believe our input can make a difference. And so what we've been working on is the ability for a viewer to bring up at any given time a dynamic mini-map that shows where all the players are in real time, synchronized to the frame of the video behind it, being able to click on any player they want, see all their stats as well, as I said earlier, but also be able to cheer for them. And that cheer is something that I click on a player, the more I cheer for them, that player now starts having fireworks and fire around their avatar. Not so that it affects what the player is experiencing, but for other viewers, they see that, as well as the output of that is taped back into the broadcast studio. And now we can start having new modalities of interaction where the viewers are deciding who the fan favorite is for any round or for matches. And so it's no longer voting, but it's actually the summary of all of the cheering that's happening in real time throughout the matches.
Yeah, I think that kind of informationally rich, kind of enhanced UI almost is kind of certainly the easiest to understand. That's kind of the thin end of the wedge of the integration, right? And some of the stuff that I've seen, which I wouldn't necessarily say has to be more ambitious, but is certainly more involved and is certainly more on the leading edge of what's being done with the technology, because we certainly haven't by any means reached the full extent of the capacity for what we can offer with these things. But I'd like to talk a little bit about some of those more advanced interactions that happen with that development. You know, when there is really that two-way flow of information between the viewer and the game itself.
So there are lots of games that I can't talk about, and there's some that I can. I think I'll start with talking about some that I can talk about. So one of our oldest developer partners is a company called Catapult, and they made a game called Chicken. And the Catapult is headed by an amazing woman named Kara Rippin, who is formerly of Viacom/Nickelodeon, did a lot of their content there. And they made this amazing adventure game that, you know, it's survival adventure. So as a player, you go out into the world and you're meant to be a force of good for the world, and you're trying to shepherd these animals in the world. Chicken in this case is CHKN, and that's how it's spelled. And similar to Minecraft, it's very voxel in terms of its graphics. And as you're going and interacting with the world, you can collect these creature blocks that then you can put together to make new emergent behavioral creatures. And what they did with our technology is create something called Chicken Arena. And originally, this is a single player / multiplayer game similar to Minecraft, but with very different, you know, experiences. But you know, you do put things together that are more than the sum of their parts. And in Chicken Arena, they created something akin to a pro wrestling match, where you'd have viewers. First of all, you'd have players who are creating these creatures, and then they'd put them in the arena. And then when they're put in the arena, they'd be faced off against each other. And as a viewer, by the way, these creatures aren't, after they put in the arena, they're not actually controlled by the player. They're completely AI driven. And as a viewer, I'm able to actually cheer on the creature, whoever the animals, whatever they are. And depending on what's happening real time in the match, the creatures would react to me and in their fight with each other. So think of all of the excitement you'd have as part of a pro wrestling match, but you're part of it and it's live on Twitch.
Yeah.
Is one example. I can give many other examples, but it's one of the ones that come to mind right now because it's something that I find very compelling, because the game itself, if you were to never play the game like Minecraft and Chicken and all these survival-based games that have crafting and putting, it starts simple, but the systems are quite complex. And even it's easy to get fooled by the aesthetics to think that these are simple games. They're quite complex. And so unless you keep playing them, or if you've never played it before, you haven't played it for some time, the game has evolved when you watch it, right? And so when you see a new completely user-generated creature for the first time, there's a lot of components going on there, right? It's got eyes from this creature and the tail from that. You wouldn't know what it is you're looking at, right? You know, these are very zany, cool creatures. And the attributes of the creature affect their abilities. So if they have a certain kind of nose, they have super smell or whatever it is, right? And so one of the things we're enabling is you can actually pull up the avatar of the creature and see what are the special features, what are the special abilities of this creature, and what do those abilities mean, right? Up until now, there would literally be no way for me to export and see all the attributes for the creature. I would have to go to Google, try to put it together, or maybe download the game, put that creature together, and then see, okay, these are the features, right? And so that's a very high burden on the viewer to understand what is going on. And what we found is that without basic understanding of what's going on in the stream, viewers don't feel comfortable, cheering one way or another, right? They're not competent enough to know what they want as an outcome. And so
Well, I don't understand any of your American sport metaphors.
exactly, well, absolutely. And the only reason we in America know this is because we have all the rich context, right? And so one of the things that Chicken has thought and Catapult's thought a lot about is how do we create shortcuts into getting viewers competent as quickly as possible in real time so that they can feel, empowered to have a view on what's going on and cheer for one creature or another, or know when their cheers make a difference. And that's, up until now, not something I think anyone's ever really experimented with.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking a little bit at the actual practicalities of how that happens as well there, because we're not asking people to sit at home and literally scream at their TVs or their monitors, although they may well do. Like the actual ways that the audiences interact kind of lead us into what I wanted to talk about next, which is the actual benefits for developers, right? This isn't just about, obviously there's a great benefit of making complex things more easily understood or giving people access to an informational layer that they might not otherwise have. But there's also some more direct benefits, right? Including monetization, including actually engaging people to the point where they go and buy the game because they're able to play it on this kind of teleological basis almost. I mean, can we talk a little bit more about what possible benefits this has for developers when they start to integrate the tech?
Sure. One of the things that we were very careful about in the beginning of the company was to make sure that we were clear on our vision. And our vision wasn't to make better streamer tools than any of the existing people in this space, because that's not our skill set. And we believe that the existing streamer tools work really well. Our focus has always been on creating developer tools. And by this, I mean ways for developers themselves to take their existing games or their existing ideas or even new ideas for interaction and create a way for them to authentically connect with the viewing audience. And what does that mean? Well, for most developers, they don't know what that means because they're so focused on the current ecosystem where they don't have a direct connection to viewers. They have a direct connection at best with obviously with their players, and some of those players may stream, and therefore by definition they have a direct connection with streamers. But this is a tenuous one because in most cases that connection is you play my game while you stream my game, and hopefully that is a rewarding experience for you while you're playing your game, while you're playing my game. Then hopefully other people who are watching that will enjoy that. And the idea there is then maybe they'll go download the game and play the game. But the problem is for all of these more kind of legacy streaming experiences was you're not interacting with my content via the stream, right? You're interacting with the streamer's content, which is built on top of my content. But how they interact with my content is completely up to them. And because of that, most game developers are resigned to the fact that they cannot have a authentic experience with viewers, which is why you get these discussions of, okay, well, maybe we'll make a marketing play out of it, or maybe we'll make a community play out of it, and whatever. And so that's before any kind of streamer developer collaboration. Then you saw a lot of games that, and which even exist today, where developers try to create community engagement tools masquerading as games for viewers, or for streamers rather, right? So I create a game that has some sort of hook for viewers to, either do something via chat, or, maybe if they're more advanced, through an extension, which is an overlay on Twitch, where the input from the viewer affects the streamer, and maybe there's some cool zany hijinks that can come from that. Again, a lot of the complication, this is a simple idea, but it has very difficult outcomes, because at the end of the day, it's very difficult if a developer is thinking as a streamer, as the direct kind of consumer, how the streamer is going to use their game. And so they'll often go to streamers and say, okay, what are the kind of things you want enabled? And they might build those experiences. But streamers tend to be very diverse, right? And so they all have their unique brands, they all have their unique communities, and they also have an element of improvisation, right? So what they say they want is true when they say it, but a lot of streamers, what they're good at is coming up with things on the fly, reacting, literally engaging with their audience. And so what they think is engaging may not be completely engaging. And at the end of the day, this is a difficult situation for a developer to be in, because they're almost at this point a work for hire tool creation agent for a streamer, right? So often you'll get these very engaging tools that are expecting the streamer to create the fun. And we've observed again and again that while it might work in micro, it may not work in macro. And for certain streamers it'll work, and for others it won't. And it's hard to keep up with that meta, to keep up with what the streamer finds interesting and what the audience therefore finds interesting. So one of the things we often do is talk with the developer to think about, rather than focus on the DM or the game master, which is what the streamer would be in this case, we think of what is the viewer, the end user experience. Again, the hundreds of millions of people who are watching the streams, and the kind of experience that the developer wants to enable for the stream, for the viewer, the stream viewer. And once the developers thought about what that is, and that could be anything from just giving them more information to giving them customizable elements to actually letting them interact with other viewers or even affect the game itself, then they can start thinking about, okay, where does a streamer fit in here? If at all. Are they just a narrator? Is this a stream that has no streamer? Is it directly run by the developer, right? These are all opportunities that the developer can dictate. And then what we found in all of our cases is that by thinking about what makes it fun to watch, then we can think about what makes it fun to stream, as opposed to making it vice versa. If we start thinking about what makes it fun to stream, and then how do we, enable the streamer to become the gravity of the stream, then it's a hard thing for a developer to add value. The streamers are already doing a good job of that themselves. Where the developer can add value is thinking about that entire interaction loop. That only becomes powerful when the developer really thinks about what the viewer experience is as its first constituent.
Okay, so I think in terms of direct benefits, I mean, this is it's not necessarily a methodology by which you would sell more copies of your base game to the viewer, right? This is more about enabling.
Again, anything is possible, right? So at the end of the day, what a developer wants to do with monetization is completely reliant on what they want to do with the kind of content they're creating, right? So one of the examples I like to give is, the phone before these came, right? And that's my dog. If you look at rotary phones, right, there weren't too many games that were being played on rotary phone, right? So at the best, you were getting people calling you to tell you to buy a thing, right? And so if you take the progression of that, when we went from that to feature phones, where we could get SMS messages or we could get native Java games, with that came the ability to buy or sell games. But we also got SMS messages to, or they were preloaded like Snake, etc. But we would get SMS messages to say, hey, check out this game, right? And then when 2008 comes and the iPhone makes it a very big unified platform for smartphones, you have app stores, et cetera, that are selling games, but you have a lot of ads for games, right? And so again, we have a non-native or non-core gaming constituent that is interested in games, that's playing games, and we're marketing to them to play games. Now, what are we marketing to them to play games? Were we marketing to them to play Xbox games? In some cases, yes. But where the biggest wins were for native experiences on that same platform, right? It's not about, going to a person who's on their phone that could play a game and say, hey, play the next Assassin's Creed on your PlayStation, right? It was, here's another game that you can play right now on this platform. Do you want to try it for free, right? And again, the free to play mentality, which, again, start for free and keep going from that was really a function that was native to, I mean, it came before, but it came to its own with smartphone games. There was an entire new kind of content, discovery, and business model that was native to smartphones. And so now take everything I just said with smartphones, replace smartphone and put stream there, and then we can talk about what our vision is here, right? So it's not necessarily only about converting non-players into players, right? It's about converting non-playing viewers into some sort of value-driving constituent as they are viewing, right? And you make a very different kind of product for a customer than you do for a potential customer.
Yeah.
Right. If they're a customer as they're consuming that content, you think about them as a customer. You think about their satisfaction. You think about their retention. You think about how you can therefore obviously monetize them while you're providing that value, as opposed to making it flashy so that they can be tutorialized and onboarded somewhere else. And again, that's a very important thing that we talk about a lot, which is that tutorialization, being able to, as you're watching the game, become competent in the game and then feel empowered to take that next step. Right. And so the short answer to your question, Dan, is it depends, which is a bad answer, but we run or support the gamut from discovery and therefore download and onboarding through a different platform. But what we think that's one end, but there's also another end that is more native to the platform, which does end-to-end monetization using Twitch bits, et cetera, on that platform itself, where the viewer can become the lowest level of friction, which is literally I jump in and I interact with the game as a viewer, and that is its own native, awesome modality for interaction.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously it sounds like a considerable evolution of both, the model, the platform, but also the nature of understanding required by developers, streamers, and viewers themselves, right? There's quite a lot of conceptual evangelism to do there. What's the time frame on this, right? Is this a kind of pitch for 2030 of what we might all be doing then, or is it a pitch for 2025 of what we might be starting to do then?
No, I think you'll be, yeah. I think you're going to start seeing awesome things this year. I think you're going to start, a lot of what we're working on has been in development for some time. And like all good games, I think there's a lot of rapid prototyping and testing that happens, but developers aren't ready to put things out until they're more comfortable with what's going to happen with it, right? And so a lot of, we've been doing this for almost 4.5 years now. And for the first year or two, we were really talking about concepts and showing proofs of concept and showing that the technology worked. And we were at that point trying to find the right developers and convince them that we weren't snake oil salesmen, right? That what we talked about actually worked in the real world. And often people, when they see our tech running for the first time, they don't believe it. They're like, okay, well, this can't be, because that's not how broadcast works, and how are you dealing with latency, and how does this scale? And as we explain why we've made certain technical decisions, how we've made them, very quickly developers and content creators and platform holders, et cetera, go, oh, okay, this makes sense, and I understand why that works, and I understand why you do it the way you're doing it. Man, that's difficult. I still don't know how you do it, but I understand this is a feasible thing that you've done. And so we've been very conscious from the very beginning that we wanted to build something for today, using today's infrastructure, using today's technology to its fullest, rather than wait for tomorrow's technology. And while tomorrow's technology opens up new dimensions for what we can enable, we don't want to be waiting for 2025 or 2030, et cetera. We want to be creating something that is monetizable today, is marketable today, because we believe that developers are going to take some time on the design side to actually figure out this problem, right? And so when those games come out is very much beholden to the developers, right? Because Unity and Epic don't control games that they don't make in terms of when they're released. Based on what I'm seeing, there are a lot of these public showcases that certain developer partners of ours are showing snapshots of what they're working on. And so those, you can assume all of those are also in production. But there are a lot of other examples that are under 18 different levels of NDA that we have insight as to what's coming tomorrow. It's exciting us. It's exactly the kind of thing that we wanted to enable. And I can't wait to talk more about that. But I look forward to seeing more stuff this year and a lot more stuff coming next year and beyond.
You touched earlier on some of the kind of practicalities of what we're doing and how it's accessed, the ways that it can be integrated. It's a free SDK. It's relatively lightweight. It doesn't have to be built into the player build, right? It sits in a kind of separate cloud layer. You mentioned Unreal, Unity, Twitch, kind of the big names associated with it. There are also some kind of risks involved in depending on that kind of third-party organizations, right? If you are putting time and effort into a feature which relies on streaming, then you have to have a streaming service that allows it and supports it and will continue to allow you to monetize it. How have you tried to ensure that is going to be a structure which supports the products of developers' work in an ongoing way?
I mean, Dan, that's a very good question. And it's not like we talked about it before, but I think that's a very well thought out point. There's a lot of risk here. Developers hate risk because they deal with enough risks as it is. They're doing some of the hardest things possible with some of the smallest budgets. And it's always a race to the finish. What Genvid is all about is to externalize most of those risks for developers, right? So it's not about, by which I mean, on the streaming platform side, if you only use the first party tools that any platform provides you, you're beholden to that one platform forever, for as long as you're using those tools. Same thing with engine, same thing with cloud infrastructure. What Genvid is very much about is creating a plug and play experience for developers to let them hedge that risk by, if for whatever reason anything happens with one platform, they can switch to another platform. And it's as simple as changing a setting on our backend. There is a lot of changes that are happening on the streaming platform side all the time. Those changes are being constantly monitored and dealt with by Genvid, so the developer doesn't have to worry about that. They just have to think about their game, what their viewer experience is, which is, again, difficult enough as it is, right? Lots of examples of new streaming platforms coming up, getting very big and then going away. Again, this is always going to be a potential risk for developers, but the same thing can be said for any platform. But what I can say is streaming is here to stay, right? The numbers of viewers are growing, number of streams growing. Regionally, you're seeing massive expansion in Asia, and we're starting to see that in the West, we're getting some remnants of that as well. So on a macro level, I wouldn't worry whether or not streaming is going to be a thing for developers. You just have to vet whether or not you believe Genvid is the right company to let you hedge that risk among all of the aggregate streaming platforms. And because we are, again, engine agnostic, we're a verified solutions partner for Unity. We work to make sure that our Unreal Engine plugin is top class. And we also have all the tools to self-port your own engine if you want to as well. We have lots of examples of porting of game engines like Godot, Lumberyard, completely custom engines. I can't talk about other engines because then I would be talking about potential games that are integrating. But there's a lot that developers can do on their own side, and we are all about empowering the developer to do that specifically.
Yeah. And it's not, one of the important questions that I had when I first started is, how do you actually make the money to pay my salary? Because, the business models it's a tricky one. So free SDK, kind of relying on developers to generate that audience.
Well, it's a tricky one for us, but it's not a tricky one for developers, right? Again, when we go back to the game developers, we're coming to developers and saying, hey, use your limited time to consider the value that you could get from creating content for viewers, right? Which is a cohort that you never thought about before, or if you have thought about it, you didn't think you could actually address. We are the ones who are therefore dangling that carrot in front of the developers. Therefore, the onus is on us to put our money where our mouth is and say, hey, we won't make money until you make money. we won't make money until not only you're convinced, but you convince others, being your end users, to give you money, of which we'll take some percentage of. And we've been very fortunate that we've gotten what we believe to be amazing capital on board via investors and partners who believe in that vision, who see the progress we're making, and are therefore wholly invested, and I don't just mean monetarily, but also, you know, intrinsically, into the vision that we have. And developers can therefore trust that we'll be not only around, but that we have aligned incentives with them, right? I like having the same incentives as my customers, right? Because I don't have to do any kind of bait and switch or I sleep extremely well at night, entrusting my future into the creativity of developers being able to create awesome experiences for end users and monetizing them, because that's been the story of the game industry. And all I'm doing is enabling them to you know, feature or address a new market. And so the business model is simple. You download the SDK. It's fully, there's nothing to unlock. There's no share element of it. It just works. You can develop locally. You can stream to Twitch. You can stream to YouTube. We have full extensions documentation. We have all of the tools to use it from day one on AWS. And we have everything is fully container based in case you want to use your own you know, private cloud or other preferred cloud provider. Nothing is you know, tied to any one provider. Same thing with Engine. Again, as I said earlier, we have plugins for the best-in-class public engines, but if you have your own preferred method, you can use that as well, and we can provide you the tools for that. The first time I make a cent is when you stream commercially to end users, and then I make a royalty based on the unique viewer per month. So if you have no viewers, I make no money, right? If you have viewers, you're getting value from that, so I make a little bit of money. You make more money as a developer than I do because you're the one making the content. And if you should monetize that content in some way by selling items to viewers or anything like that, then I take a small rev share of that, right? I'm not a platform in the traditional sense. You're on other people's platforms, so I don't take a full platform cut or anything like that. And everything else, if you require our services for additional support or for development, we also have or live services, et cetera. We have a services component as well that is, you know, just a traditional work for hire services charge man hour kind of thing. That's not what we're looking to make our business on, but it's there for the people who are in need of that.
Yeah. Okay. I want to use just the last bit of time we have to do a bit of kind of crystal ball gazing and think a bit about where this goes next. You know, we're already talking about a considerable step change that is going to necessitate the evolution of understanding from the viewer and from developer, potentially creating an entirely new model of interaction in a way. Where else does this go beyond games, really? You know, what other stuff potentially is this going to be applied to? You know, you mentioned, you know, every time you say DM in this conversation or any other conversation, I immediately start thinking of these, you know, grand kind of D&D games where you know one streamer is D&D, is the game master, and everyone else is kind of, you know, is party members, that sort of stuff. There are some, you know, relatively small jumps of logic to things like that, but I think there's a much broader potential beyond that, right?
Well, yes, but that's significant in and of itself. The way I see it is billions of people interact with video today. And how they interact with it is a function of the technology that was there when that content was created. And with our enabling content technology, we should be able to enable brand new content. And so this can be disruptive for just about any kind of content, which is a bit grandiose. But what I mean is we start from the video game space because that's our background, right? We see interactive streaming, and we position ourselves as an interactive streaming engine, but as the intersection of traditional media being something that's made for a wide audience and a engaged but not necessarily interactive audience, right? People who are doing more sit back, and gaming, which is more for people who are sit forward and expect, ping pong, right? They expect something based on their input. It's the Goldilocks, just right, whether it's the bed or the porridge in the middle of that. And it lets for the benefits of both sides. Wide audience, something that's more casual and less cognitive load, if that's the mode that you like, with the ability to sit forward and knock on the glass and actually, affect what you're watching. And what kind of content this is potentially work for? It can work for anything from, again, games, which if we do games well is enough, but there's so much more opportunity, whether it's sports. Sports is the best example of what started off as a participant-only experience that through iteration and innovation, we have lots of examples of spectator sports, where the viewer, the spectator, the person in the stands or the person watching at home is the person who is either directly or indirectly being monetized, and therefore is the person who is the entire experience is created for, right? And imagine all the things I've just said about click on the player, find out stats, cheer, be able to affect what the player's experience is, what that could be for real world physical sports. That's all possible. But what really excites us is the transformative, new greenfield opportunities of a type of content that doesn't exist today, right? And so we call these miles, which is massive interactive live events, which really straddle the genres of games and traditional media. These are things that are live, that are massive, that are interactive in their events, right? So the idea, I think the closest thing to it is watching the Olympics or watching the World Cup. And again, you said as a throwaway line earlier, yelling at the screen and expecting something happens. Yes, we want to power things like that. So the live nature of it is important. When you look at really successful series that are still shown week to week, or even if they're dropped on Netflix all in one, there's a window of water cooler talk that happens around that, right? We want to bring all of that energy live to the viewing component of it live, right? And when you're yelling at Linda to not go into that room because you know that there's a mass murderer in there, right? And you're yelling, "Don't go in there," maybe she hears it, right? And that's all happening in real time. You're not controlling Linda. Linda could hear you and go, "I'm going to go in there. I've been warned. I'm going to get Jason," right? It's not about complete control over what you're watching, which is play, right? Which is a function of skill and time. And it's not about just yelling and knowing that you're an irrational person yelling at the screen that doesn't hear you, or maybe does hear you, and that's scary. But
that's really popular enough, right?
Yeah, indeed. But that, and you and everyone else in the world doing it at the same time. And these are already things that we already care a lot about. That's why, we watch election coverage. That's why we do polling. That's why we watch the stock market. That's why there's a lot of things that are these massive systems that are functions of individual actors or agents that are inputting into that system, that we're the ants watching the ant farm, right? And we see the opportunity for these new kinds of content to not necessarily replace, but definitely outperform or at least supplement what exists today. And you're already seeing some early signs of it, and I can't wait until the market is able to see about some of the stuff we're supporting right now. Because that's the entire reason that we got into what we're doing. And people love watching things together. That people love the idea that their watching makes a difference, but they also want to see something that has been thought through, where there's a level of authorship and narrative and quality there that they're inputting into. And it's exactly those kind of experiences that we're looking to power.
Yeah. People want to see something that someone else has planned meticulously so they can mess it up and make it go exactly the way they want to.
Right. Well, that's not messing it up. That's to plan, right? It's just their plan.
Cool. All right. Interesting stuff. Thank you ever so much, Chris. Thank you everyone for watching. I think there should be some information afterwards if you want to get in touch and find out more. And we will have a virtual booth at the show as well. So come visit us there and see what else we have to offer.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.